This is Algebra 1, Lesson 3.2, solving equations using multiplication and division. Just like the last couple of days doing addition and subtraction, we're undoing problems by using multiplication and division, beginning on page 138. Few definitions to start. Properties of equalities or rules of algebra. Used to transform equations into equivalent equations. What that means is it's the rules you use for each solution step to solve an equation. The ratio of A to B, if A and B are two quantities measured in the same units, the ratio of A to B. So what it's saying is the way A compares to B, or its ratio, how they're related to each other, can be written as A over B as a fraction, or A divided by B. Similar triangles are two triangles that have equal corresponding angles. Anytime you see this word similar, that means same shape. For example, this triangle here is similar to this triangle here. Because even though one of them is much larger than the other one, they're the same shape, and they're similar because their sizes are proportional to each other. First box you have is transformations that produce equivalent equations. It says multiply each side of the equation by the same non-zero number. So x over 2, you cancel out this, you read this as divide by 2. You know to cancel out division, you multiply. So if you multiply this side by 2, it'll cancel out the division of 2. If you multiply the left by 2, just like the rest of them, you multiply the right by 2 to get x is 6. The other one is dividing each side by the same non-zero number. This says 4 times x is equal to 12. That's what it means when two things are right next to each other. Cancel out 4 times something by dividing by 4 to get x. If you divide the left, do the same to the right. You always do the same operation on both sides, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. Example number 1 says dividing each side of an equation. So this, again, just like the last one, says 8 times x is equal to negative 3. Undo, there were too many negatives up there, undo 8 times something by dividing by 8. If you divide the left by 8, divide the right by 8. So just like we did yesterday, if you have to ignore one side and just look at the left side of the equal sign, get the x by itself. It says 8 times it, so divide by 8. You get negative 3 over 8. Again, this is just each step going down, dividing each side by 8, and simplifying negative 3 over 8. Example number 2 is multiplying each side of an equation. Now, unlike the last one, instead of saying something times x, now it says x divided by negative 3 equals 60. Cancel out division of negative 3 by multiplying by negative 3. Again, if you have to look only at one side of that equation, only look at that one side. Figure out, what do I have to do to it to get x by itself? This will cancel out division of negative 3. But since you did it to the left side, you have to make it even by balancing it and multiplying the right side by the same operation. 60 times negative 3 is negative 180. Example number 3 is multiplying each side by a reciprocal. Now it says negative 3 over 4 times m equals 15. So multiplication tells you that you have to undo it by dividing. So you would undo this by dividing by negative 3 over 4, and that'll cancel it out. However, just to save you a step, you know when you divide by fractions, just like in the bell work, you multiply by the reciprocal. So instead of dividing by negative 3 over 4, it just goes ahead and jumps to the next step, which was multiplying by the reciprocal. Is just the fancy word that means to flip it, negative 4 over 3. This cancels it out on this side and gives you m. That's what you were trying to get. But then you have to multiply the right side by the same reciprocal, negative 4 over 3. And when you do that, negative 15 times negative 4 is negative 60. Divided by 3 is going to be negative 20. Properties of equality. The addition property says if A is equal to B, then A plus C is going to be the same thing as B plus C, since A and B are equal. Okay, the subtraction property is the same thing, just in reverse. It says if A is equal to B, then A minus C is equal to B minus C. The multiplication property of equality says if A is equal to B, then C times A is equal to C times B. And then the division property says if A is B, or A is equal to B, and C is not equal to 0, then A divided by C is equal to B divided by C. So all this is saying, this is all just rules, like we said. That's what properties are. This is just rules that makes it to where you can undo the problems. Okay, for the checkpoint, we have 9x is equal to 72. That means 9 times x. Undo. Again, you can ignore one side of the problem, ignore the right side, and just ask yourself, how do I get x equals all by itself? That says 9 times something, so you undo times something by dividing. If you divide, you want to keep x, so divide by 9, and it'll cancel it out and give you x by itself. That was the goal. If you divide the right, you have to divide the left. You have to divide the right by the same 9. 72 divided by 9 is going to be the number 8. So x is 8. Same thing for number 2. They're just the variables on the right side of the equal sign. It says 11 times m. Undo that by dividing by 11. If you divide the right, divide the left by 11. It cancels it out on the right and leaves you with m. And 4 divided by 11, there is no number that goes into both of those, so we can leave it as simply the fraction 4 over 11. Number 3 says y over negative 6, or y divided by negative 6. Undo divide by negative 6. I'm going to rewrite it to where we can see it a little bit better. Y divided by negative 6 equals negative 15. Undo divide by something by multiplying by negative 6. If you multiply the left side, it cancels it out and it leaves you with y. That was the goal. But you have to multiply the right side by negative 6. A negative times a negative, we know is going to be a positive. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 1 plus 3 is going to be the number 90. Y's value is going to be a positive 90. Number 8 says negative 5 over 2 is equal to n over 2. Again, I'll rewrite that one so we can see it a little bit better. Negative 5 over 2 equals n over 2, or n divided by 2. Your goal, again, just like the rest of them, is to get n all by itself, not n divided by something. It says divide by 2, cancel out divide by multiplying by 2. If you multiply the right, do the same to the left. You always do the same operation. So this is 2 cancels out divide by 2 there, and it cancels it out here as well. N is equal to negative 5. If you multiply straight across, you'd have put 2 over 1, and you'd have got negative 10 over 2, which would have divided by and simplified to negative 5. Okay, it cancels out. If you need to see how, if you put them over 1 and you multiply straight across, 2 times n would give you 2n. And 2 times 1 will give you 2. This says 2 divided by 2, which cancels to 1. You do the same thing on the other side. 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. 1 times 2 is 2. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. Number 5 says negative 2 over 9b is equal to m. Now that says negative 2 over 9 times b is equal to m. We know how to undo multiply by something. You divide. So you would divide by negative 2 over 9 to cancel it out. But on example number 3 we talked about, you can skip a step, since when you divide by fractions, you multiply by the reciprocal anyways. So instead of dividing by the fraction and then multiplying by the reciprocal, you can just go straight ahead into multiplying by the reciprocal, negative 9 over 2. If you multiply the left, multiply the right by negative 9 over 2. It'll cancel the left and leave you with just b. That was the goal. If you multiply straight across on the other side, or cross cancel would even be much easier, because the number 2 goes into itself 1 time and it goes into 18 9 times. So when you multiply straight across, now you're dealing with smaller numbers. 9 times negative 9 is negative 81. B's value is negative 81. And then the same thing is true for the next one. 3 over 35 is equal to 2 over 5 times a. Again, you would undo times 2 over 5 by dividing by 2 over 5. But instead of doing that, you can skip a step and go ahead and multiply by the reciprocal and save you some time. So multiplied by the reciprocal instead of 2 over 5, 5 over 2 will cancel this out. If you multiply the right side, you'll get a by itself, which was the goal. Multiply the left side by the same 5 over 2 to balance it. And again, we're going to cross cancel. The number 5 goes into itself one time and into 35 7 times. Now we're dealing with a lot smaller numbers. Straight across, 1 times 3 is 3, and 2 times 4, 7 is the number 14. A is equal to 3 over 14.